Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hammer Podcast. Today is June 4th, 2024, and I'm speaking with Sam. Sam went to the Pathway Family Center in, you say Detroit, Michigan?
Basically,
Basically.
Southfield.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, I got a few announcements. Monday, June 10th, I have Tara coming on. Tara went to the Happiness Hill Home for Girls. She'll be telling us her story about her time there. And on the 19th, which is a Wednesday, I have Carissa coming back on. Carissa went to the Victory Christian Academy in Florida. This is a part 2. She told me she didn't finish the story. So we're going to go ahead and give her a chance to do that. All right. So, Sam.
Hey.
Give us a little bit of background on this center, because nobody, like I said, nobody that's watched this podcast knows nothing about it.
Okay. Well, I didn't really know much about it either until probably early 2003. So I grew up very Protestant. We went to like non-denominational kind of rock and roll churches, and we went to one very consistently for most of my early life, and then probably early teens, there was kind of a falling out with that church, and started moving around. And to get right to it, there was a pastor that at the new church that we went to that had a daughter that was my age, and we were friends. And one day she disappeared, and no one really knew. I had talked to some friends, and it was always like this kind of weird, like, it's weird, man. They're watching her. She can send us letters, kind of, but she really can't talk to any of us. And so 6 months later, I end up at this place, and I see her there, and I figure out what's going on. So,
why did you go there?
I was pretty classic troubled teen. I didn't really take to the religion thing. I had 2 older siblings that did very well as far as religion and school, and I didn't do very good in school. I was very rebellious. I was listening to Metallica.
Oh man, what a sin!
All the evil stuff. Yeah, I was really diving in. And but no, I mean, I started smoking cigarettes in probably middle school, and 7th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and started smoking pot in like 8th grade. And I had terrible luck. I kept getting caught. So my mom kept thinking I was, she never dealt with it. She was very straight edge. Neither of my parents drank. They still don't drink. They didn't really know any of that lifestyle. They were raised through the 60s, but they rejected all that. And so for me to go down those roads, I wasn't like crazy into it. I was just kind of rebellious. I wanted to listen to rock and roll and smoke joints with my friends. That's really what I wanted to do. And but it was very, I got kicked out of the house a few times. They sent me to like a private Christian school that I got kicked out of for what would be normal behavior in a public school, but it didn't go well in the private school situation. And so I went to this military school in Missouri called Kemper Military School, and did like a semester there. And I live in Michigan, so Missouri felt like a long way away. And they told me when they sent me to this Christian school, if you get kicked out of here, you're going to military school. And I didn't believe them, but they're very much of their word. So I got kicked out, and off I went. And then, I lived out of my car for a little while because one morning I refused to get up to go to church, and I got thrown out of the house. And instead of coming back and begging to be back in, I grabbed my car and took off for a few months. And when I came back home, the idea was you can come back home and live here. I was 16 at the time. You can come back and live here if you can pass a drug test. And, I passed, I think, one, and then I didn't pass one, the next one. So I was like on this, like my mom was drug testing me, searching my room randomly. Yeah, it was very like intense. So, I failed, and I ended up at Pathway. They told me we're going to family therapy the next morning. You don't got to go to school, sleep in. We're going to family therapy. Okay. Which wasn't new because I had been in all that. They had tried to put me on, all sorts of ADD pills and antidepressants. And, I never really took to those. So to me, going to therapy the next morning didn't seem that weird. And when I got there, they took me into this office and they separated me from my parents and we did what they called an intake. And it was an office building in Southfield. So it just looked like a normal office building. Do this intake and they're asking me all those questions and there's this kid sitting in the corner, kind of just watching and listening. And, later he ended up being the one that would like, restrain me and take me into the group and, kind of manhandled me a little bit, and
Right.
for a little bit, it seemed like, I was kind of a cocky teenager. I felt like I was pretty open, with what I was doing. So when they asked me these questions, like, how often do you smoke pot? I would say, I don't know, every day. I don't know. I would probably exaggerate even, to
Right.
kind of fuel the rebellious kind of vibe. And, well, she said to me, after all these questions, we think you're a great candidate for this program. So we're going to bring your parents in and they're going to say goodbye and you're not going to see them for a while. And I like flipped out. I actually tried to walk out and then like my dad grabbed me and like, restrained me. And it wasn't violent, but it was almost violent. It was very loud, a lot of swearing. And then I was, they left and I was just kind of there, which I had been left before in military school. So that wasn't like super foreign to me. But it took a little while to figure out that this is like this tiered program where when you're there at the beginning, it's called like you're a newcomer. You don't get shoes. You can't really talk to anybody. You can't stand up. You have to ask permission to do everything. It was this
Wow.
very like controlled situation. And, I didn't realize that. Go ahead.
That sounds like almost every troubled teen home that I've heard on this podcast. I mean,
Oh, it's a system. Yeah.
almost
I mean,
the exact. Yeah.
yeah.
What was it? Was it a religious center or was it just state run or private or?
No, it was private. It wasn't religious, very 12-step focused. Like going to AA was a part of it once you got to a certain point. And I remember seeing like, again, I was kind of a typical like stoner teenager. So I was really into sort of like the new age, like Terrence McKenna, like psychedelia, like I'm not just getting high, mom. I'm evolving my consciousness kind of, which I find is very silly now, but at the time.
Right.
So
Right.
I actually got there and I saw all this talk of God and stuff. And I was almost like intrigued because finally I was kind of free from like the shackles of like Christian, it didn't have to be Christian. It could be like almost whatever. And it had only lasted a few hours until like I realized I couldn't do anything. Yeah.
So it would be something to put you on the higher mortal plane, something
Yeah.
that would a higher consciousness, so to speak.
Yeah, we had to do these things called moral inventories or MIs is what we called them, like every day. And it was like a list of like, it was basically daily journaling you had to do. And I remember one of my first ones I wrote, I was trying to be positive. I was like, maybe this isn't so bad. I can like meditate more often or something stupid. But
so there were boys and girls there.
There were boys and girls there, but
they were separated, of course.
They were very much separated. So we had a situation where we had what was called the building, and that was in Southfield. It was an office building. And without getting on a tangent, a funny thing is that underneath us was one of those like salespeople cults where we could hear them cheering and like, which is really funny because we were in a cult right above them just for teenagers,
Right.
But so yeah, we're at the building from like, I think officially the hours were 9 to 5, but depending on your lodging situation at the time, you might get there at like 6 and have to just kind of sit there and read until maybe 9 a.m. And I always had trouble staying awake. I'd get yelled at for falling asleep. And so we're at the building, but then otherwise we spent our time at host homes. So every family that was there, every kid, his parents had to be involved and like totally redo their house, lock up all the knives and drugs and put locks and alarms on all the doors and host like 3 to maybe sometimes 5 clients at a time and come and pick them up every day, take them home, feed them, have them sleep there, and so even follow. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, just like follow the rules. Like when we were at their houses, like they had to almost follow the same like weird, because we had like weird like language rules, like how we could talk about things and they had to follow like that vernacular, or like even we would call them out. Like even the parents are being watched by the clients in a
Yeah.
way. Total
So
panoply.
so basically, it wasn't like a big building where everybody went to school and ate and slept. You had to go to other people's houses, and of
Yep.
course, you didn't go to your parents' house. Did they participate?
Eventually, so the parents get like, I don't know. I think it takes maybe 90 days for them to get probably properly indoctrinated to do it, and B, to get their house set up. Because like, yeah, you have to have every like, every room has to have a lock on it. The doors have to be able to lock from the inside. Alarms on the doors. I mean, you turn your house into a jail basically.
Right. Well, this is interesting. I have never heard of this before.
Oh man, well, I got a lot to tell
Yeah,
you.
usually, like I said, people are in just a big, gigantic building where they all reside.
Mhm.
They're not allowed to go anywhere because they're afraid that they're going to run. They're going to
Yeah.
run away.
Oh, we had that. I mean, our shoes were locked up as soon as we got to the houses. They went to a closet with a lock on it, and all the doors and windows, like I said, had locks. When I was at Kemper Military School, that's a very old, Boonville, Missouri. It's been open. Their slowest year of enrollment was during the Civil War, is the way I date that. And that was more like barracks, and we were all kind of there.
Right.
So this was very different. And to me, it kind of makes sense. It's like, I picture these programs as absolute scams, and it's like,
Well, they are.
what a way to save money, and just have the people that are giving you already 30 grand a year, open their house up and spend
Yeah.
their money. Yeah, I mean, it's genius.
Yeah.
So, um, so yeah, that was the housing situation, but it got super weird. Like, so have you heard about like the tiered levels? Do they have those in the other programs, like level
Yeah.
one?
They would have certain levels, and along with those levels, they would have a certain color uniform. Like some would be purple shirts,
Oh,
yellow
yeah.
shirts, red shirts, that kind of stuff. That basically told everybody what level you were on.
Okay.
You know,
We
so
didn't. We had everything was supposed to be brandless. So all of our clothes, actually, so I got dropped off at the building, I think on like a Thursday, um, early in the morning, and I didn't really figure out what was going on until that evening when we were getting kind of dispersed into our houses that we would go to, because it was like you'd have a weekend house from like Friday to Monday, and then you'd have like a Monday to Thursday house. So I think I got there right in time for the weekend house. And I'll tell you what, there was a house right next to my parents' house and my sort of stomping grounds that I was actually supposed to go to my first night. And I started talking to one of the older, because you can't talk to the newcomers. The phase ones are not allowed to talk to each other. You're not. They called it clicking. You can't even like wink at each other or laugh. You have to ignore their existence because you're so low trust. You could team up or whatever. And
right.
so anyway, I ran my mouth, and I got the kid figured out that I was going to a close place that was close to my home, and he put his hand right up, and you can't go there, and got me switched to somewhere an hour from home. But man, if I had gone there, I'd have
Yeah.
been out of there. That was my neighborhood.
What an asshole, right?
Yeah, yeah. Ended up, yeah, yeah. Well, that was, I don't really blame a lot of them, because I ended up doing that sort of stuff to kids myself. As you grow in the program and you go up levels, it's all built on, you get dominion over them, and it's total. It's not Dunning Kruger. What's the thing where basically the abuser becomes the abused becomes the abuser, sort of thing. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah, I know what you're saying. That happens a lot in the other homes too. Yeah,
yeah,
they get
that's
this
how.
sense. They get that sense of entitlement. Like, well, I've been through it. You're going to go through it. You know what I mean?
And you got to do it, or you're stuck there.
Right.
If you slip or whatever, they called it refreshers. They put you back on level one for six. I mean, when I got there were kids that had been there for 18 months or longer. And
What was the length of the program? How long were you supposed to be there?
it was all about your own progress, so depending on how much you could adapt, and it was all about admitting you have a drug problem,
Of course.
and not just admitting you had drug problems, but you had to show feelings. I remember that was a big thing that they'd be like, you're there for a few weeks, and maybe they'd get to you. You know, one of the first things to do is fill out 101's ways list. They called it, and it's like 101 ways that drugs negatively impacted you. And you know, I'm like 16. I smoke some pot with my friends. Like I'm at like reason number 10, and I'm making stuff up. So
No,
it's
it's
like,
okay.
all
It's
right.
okay. Go ahead.
So it's like it's such a weird thing, but you do things like that for even 30 days where you have no idea where you are. You're moving locations every week. You don't know anybody. It doesn't take long for it to sort of set in, and you start playing along because you see it's tiered very well. As you go up, you start getting certain rights, like little ones, as you can wear shoes again and not have to shower supervised. That's not a little one, but you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
first, you get basic human rights, and then you get things like you can listen to music, watch TV, things like that. So once you get up there, you're not trying to lose that.
Right. So when you went to the other houses where you slept and all that stuff,
Yeah.
you said there were what? You said five? Five went to
Uh,
one house?
3 to 5. Sometimes it would depend on the house, and sometimes it
Okay.
would depend on current enrollment. I would say this is really rough, but when I was there, there's always more guys than girls, but it was generally probably 15 to 20 guys and 10 to 15 girls.
Okay. So would they send like a higher up along with, let's say, four newcomers basically to watch over them
Yes.
along
Oh,
as the
yeah.
parents?
And
Yeah.
yeah, so there was, again, it would shift depending on what the population was looking like, more or less, and what kind of ranks you had. So yeah, you would have maybe one or two newcomers together, and then 2 to 3 old comers, or there were 5 phases. So you had the fifth phaser, which is like big dog. And yeah, they would, I mean, it was ridiculous, dude. You would, especially on a weekend, like you'd wake up and you'd have breakfast or whatever, but like a newcomer would have to ask for permission to stand up. Like, say you're on one couch and you want to go over and like maybe grab a handful of Cheez-Its or something, you got to say, "Can I get up?" And the old comers got to say, "Yeah."
Hmm.
And then you get up and go do it. Or like just like things like that were really crazy. Like, so to go to the bathroom, this is in suburban houses, and parents are just watching this. Sometimes siblings are there, and if you have to go to the bathroom as a newcomer at the house, you strip down to your boxers in front of an old comer, not a parent, not an adult, another peer,
Yeah.
and you do the whole, you show them you don't have anything in your mouth, you shake around. That's every time, and then you have to keep the door open 6 inches, and that's every time you shower or use the bathroom, and
I th-
and every time when you go into the room that you sleep, you have to do that. So all the newcomers line up. I mean, you could be in a house with 3 newcomers, and they're all on the line, like shaking in their underwear.
I think they named this place wrong. It should have been the Pathway Penitentiary. I mean,
Well,
it's
well, yeah. I mean,
it's
it's
exactly
worth
what they
it.
do in
I've had
prison.
friends that have been in jail and prison, and they it wasn't, well, it doesn't sound as bad, but
No, but yeah, just stripped down to their boxers. They gotta make sure there's nothing. The only thing they didn't do is probably the body cavity check, but you
no,
know,
which I'm sure they would have. I bet they got in trouble for it and had to stop. I mean, that's
probably. Who knows?
everything they didn't do. I always assume they had done, and someone caught.
A little trial and error, so to
Yeah,
speak.
yeah, and we can get into it, or maybe another episode. But there's a long kind of historical tracking to this specific program, and the war on drugs and all that stuff. It even kind of goes into the MK Ultra stuff. I mean, I don't know how much you know about that stuff, but I mean, it's trial programming for conditioning and mind control, basically, in my opinion. And
Right.
I could back that up with certain things, but I don't know if that's today's topic. But so, but yeah, it was gnarly, and you again, like I hated the people that were doing that to me when I got there, but it only took 6 months for me to do that to other kids.
So, well,
And
it's pretty much like with all these places, it's just a self survival mechanism, basically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't want to get in trouble, so you got to do it. You have to do this because
Yeah.
not only will the newcomers get in trouble, you're going to get in trouble, and they might bump you back down to newcomer.
And, time is super precious there,
Yeah,
especially when you start seeing kids that have been there for 18 to 24 months and you learn kind of why it took them 6 months to even cooperate at all.
yeah.
And it's like, dude, I don't know, man. So
Self
even your
self-preservation.
allow it, sometimes I get embarrassed on how much, I mean, I said all the lines by the time I was out of there. I was sure I was a drug addict, and if I hadn't been here, I'd have died. I was spitting this game, not just to the kids, but like they would bring parents in that were curious and they'd bring me in to sell it. And
Right.
it's crazy. I don't
Was
like
this was
myself too
this
bad about it,
wa-
but
was this place out in the middle of nowhere, or was it on the
I don't
outskirts of
know.
town? Or
No, I mean, this is considered Detroit. I mean, this is, again, it was in a 3 or 4 story, like business complex.
right?
I think we were the top floor. There was a place underneath us, like I said, was the sales company, super
Huh.
hype sales company.
So they
Uh,
ran it like a business, basically.
oh yeah, super low key. Yeah, we were only there 9 to 5. So I bet whoever that landlord was, unless they noticed all the kids getting walked in. So they did this thing for newcomers called arming, where you would if I was a newcomer, there'd be a newcomer next to me. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, I can
He would
see.
grab this arm and keep me crossed like this anytime I was walking to a car or from a car to a building. And even when you're first there at the building, even though you don't have shoes on, they would do that if you had to go to the bathroom or if you were even just to go to where we would eat lunch. And so, I mean, I can't imagine being at work and looking out the window and seeing teenagers holding each other, restraining each other.
Yeah,
Apparently, nobody noticed.
yeah. You think that would raise some red flags, but I guess
Sure would with
not.
me. Yeah, I mean, especially now.
I mean, if it were me and I saw that, I'd be like, should I call the police? I mean,
Well, we were all under 18, so we were all technically signed over, and a lot of kids made runs for it, and they get caught and brought back, and because it all
yeah,
comes down to mom and dad want you here, and can't do nothing. Sorry. So
yeah,
I never ran. Sometimes I wish I had, but I really almost everybody that ran came back. They always came back, but sometimes their parents would use that as like, okay, if it's this serious, maybe we'll play it out. So some of them got pulled, but I'd say it's about 50-50. I knew
hmm,
once my parents sent me to military school, they were pretty serious, so I didn't expect them to pull me out. So
right. So were there any? Of course, I'm sure they had a physician, a doctor there, or nurse or something.
yeah, oh yeah, we had this whole chain of command of therapists and nurses and doctor and psychiatrist, and it was all a joke. The nurse, I feel bad. I would feel bad if she ever saw this, but like, I mean, she was not like a nurse, and she had no idea what was going on there. Like, she's only there so infrequently that like, if you would try to explain like what's happening, she wouldn't get it. She was super flighty, didn't know what was going on. There
Right.
was a main physician and a psychiatrist. That I saw the psychiatrist once. The physician, I don't think I ever saw. I mean, I think it's all part of your intake. You see them, and then you're left with basically counselors who I think at best have like bachelors in social work, and they had what they had called peer staff too, which did most of the heavy lifting. Was former graduates that worked for minimum wage and
I was going to say they probably worked for cheap. Yeah.
oh, actually, I graduated. The guy that called me out about where I was going that first night, he ended up being peer staff for a little while. He ended up being a little bitter about it once he kind of saw how the sausage is made, but he never really turned on him. Like a few of us really like kind of turned on that place, but I still know people from there that are still they're not just like still sober, which is fine, but they like still say that saved their life, and I'm just like, I don't know, you were 15.
Yeah.
How do you know? Like, how can you know?
I
But
mean, you could have just grown out of it. I mean,
I
when I
know,
was a when I was a kid, I smoked pot too. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
Yeah, I
You
still
know,
smoke pot, and I
yeah,
have a job and a family, and I mean, I don't know, what do you want
sure, yeah,
from me? And,
you know.
it's legal here, so, yeah.
Oh, okay. But I mean, me, I just choose not to. It's
Yeah,
just but that's just me. You know what I mean?
yeah, I don't do anything else. I
Yeah.
don't I think my parents' big fear is that the whole slippery slope thing where, well, now he's smoking pot and he'll be
Nah,
doing
that was
heroin soon, and,
that was
I never
debunked. That was debunked a long time ago.
well, you're talking to basically non-denominational. I don't know. I don't know what
Oh
your
yeah.
stance is. I don't want to dog that too much, but they were coming in very ignorant, very
No.
inexperienced, believing everything. And so, yeah, actually,
Well,
the way they knew, like I said, it was the pastor's daughter. So I think that was a big part of it too, is that they saw what was happening. And now that I know that program a bit, I see how it was about 6 months later where she probably started to turn, and they're like, all of a sudden, she's doing so good. She loves her family. She's drug free. And then my parents are like, "Oh yeah, this is what we need." And then, so when I got there, I actually saw her, and we weren't allowed to look at either side or acknowledge either side, but a lot of things kind of came together for me. Clicked on that, like, oh, this. That's how I knew I was kind of screwed too, because I was like, well, we haven't heard from her in 6 months. I guess no one's here
right.
with me for at least 6 months either, and
Did
so
did they have any type of well, being that you were at other people's houses, but Sunday church services or anything like that, or
no,
no?
once you got to where you were like trusted enough to be able to go to AA meetings, and there was even a point where I didn't do it, but some kids went to school. They went back to their school, but and you could go on like shopping trips. They would let you go like out. Everything, every minute was planned. Like from this time, I'm going to be here. From this time, I'm going to be here. But you could go out to eat or
Okay.
go shopping or whatever once you got to a certain point, and church was part of that.
Okay.
Um, so as long as it was approved and you were on the right level,
A
you could go
trustee,
through.
so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you would have to have someone go with you. Not always. It just kind of depends on where you were in the program. When you're on fifth phase, you get a whole. I think it was a week. Might have been 2 weeks. Probably just a week. You get a whole week vacation where you basically just get to go home and. But it's like daily check-ins and it's daily. It's really testing to see if the programming stick is how I see it. And
Right.
when I took
What
my week vacation, I went to 3 AA meetings a day because I didn't know how to be a normal person because I spent, our whole days in the building were basically therapy sessions, group sessions, but
what
those
what
were nightmares. I mean,
what about school? Did they have classrooms?
they had a classroom, and it was basically run by, again, like a very clueless alleged teacher that didn't seem to know what was going on. When I was there, we cycled through a couple of them, and I almost, I go back and forth
Yeah.
between like kind of being angry at these people and the teachers, and then one specific nurse. I almost feel bad for because I feel like they were just too flighty and like they just didn't get it. And you couldn't say. I mean, if I had gone up to that teacher and said, "Hey, you got to help me get out of here. This is crazy," I'd have been found out immediately and set back. Wouldn't talk to my parents for 6 months. You get totally obliterated. So, but yeah, anyway, so we had a room that was a school room, and most of it. So my mom was able to find a lot of us were on homeschool curriculums, basically, is what it was.
Okay.
Or
All
your
right.
local school would work with you and send you things, and that was part of the teacher's job was to help me the correspondence for that.
Okay.
For me, I mean, I think I was in 11th grade when I went there. I was already at like an alternative school, which is very lax and kind of for, you know, in hindsight, I don't even see it as troubled kids. I think it's just for kids that don't fit into the normal structure, which, even aside from my own experience, I just don't think school is really for everybody. I think there's a whole conversation there too. So I kind of
Sure.
like these alternative schools, and they were working with me, and I was doing some back and forth stuff. Um, I don't remember. I don't really remember what I ended up just getting my GED when I got out, because I got out like what would have been mid senior year, mid to late senior year for me, and I hadn't really been to school since like the first month of junior year. So I wasn't about to go back to school. I don't know. I'd
Right.
be so connected because I had already switched. Like my whole schooling career was like every 2 years I'd get moved around because my mom had like this fear complex. She didn't like my friend group, so she'd like pull me out of school and homeschool me for a while, or send me to the local Christian school, or then send me back to the other school because maybe those friends. I honestly don't know. But,
Right.
so I bet by the time I was like almost 18, I was like, I'm not gonna go back to school. I'll just get my GED and
Good GD.
get a job and be done.
Were any of the kids ever restrained or abused anyway?
Oh, we definitely restrained. Usually the restraining. I mean, I don't want to say they had it coming, but usually it was like they were at least trying to leave, or like I remember one kid specifically, like uh, just started grabbing chairs and slamming them against each other and on the ground and against the wall and stuff, and he was restrained. Um, so there was some restraining. I've heard that before I was there, it was a lot worse. So I can gladly say that there was not a lot of physical violence on me, or I didn't see much of that. Um, I saw more at military school. I'll say that as far as violence, um, but I did see some restraining.
Okay. What about any types of abuse? Like, I mean, being that there were girls there, any type of abuse
Um,
towards them, towards the boys,
well, again, it's part of the almost the genius of the thing to where you don't really have a lot of adult like it's like Lord of the Flies almost. Like there's not
Yeah,
there weren't a lot of people around like adults to abuse people. It was all kind of psychological.
sure.
Um, what there was a lot of rumors for the girls' side about and it happened in the guy side too. They would there was like rapey stuff.
Sexual abuse. Yeah. Okay.
And some of it would seemingly be consensual, but when you think about the dynamic of the whole thing, I doubt much of it was. Um, and there was like gross rumors about like, oh, there's reasons we don't let dogs in the girls' side sleeping room anymore, and I mean,
Okay.
there's
Yeah.
like, who knows if that was real or not? That was just like,
Right.
so I
Yeah.
guess I don't know, and I never really
Uh,
asked, so who knows? But I know that on the guy's side there was one dude got in trouble for you know all sorts of things came out about him, and there was like a small group of the dudes that were commingling when people were asleep or whatever, and it was usually a higher phaser guy with a lower phaser guy almost always. So
yeah.
um but again, I personally I can't really nothing like that happened to me. I was never approached, and
Well, that's good.
yeah, that's not my thing. So I didn't, so I don't know, but there were rumors of it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. And again, looking at like the history of the whole lineage of Pathway up into Straight and Synanon and all that stuff, a lot of that was kind of probably built on that. So I'm sure it's there. But like when I was there, as my time was ending there was like a new director, and things were sort of changing. Like the whole like sidearm restraint turned
Yeah.
into just holding belt loops, and like there's a little humanity coming in. I think they were under some pressure because they only stayed open for like 2 or 3 years after I was there. So I think pressure came in and people were starting to say and talk. And, I've kind of followed a little bit. And there's like online forums where they talk about lawsuits. And I
Right.
think I got it off a lot better than a lot of people did there.
Or,
Especially if you ever talk to anybody from Straight Incorporated, I mean, most of that was shut down by, I think, the late 90s, mid to late 90s. I mean, straight Detroit closed, and like a week later, Pathway opened with the same staff. And so, I mean, it's a direct lineage, but I've heard just nightmares from Straight, and I'm in some Straight like Facebook groups and stuff, and I
right.
mean,
Well, if anybody if anybody went to Straight Inc. or Incorporated wants to come
yeah.
on, The number is in the description box. I can also bring it out here. If you want to come on, we set up a time, talk about it. So, but yeah, it seems like it was more of it was more not so much a troubled teen home. It was more like a chemical dependency center, where basically.
Well, I mean, we'd have kids there though that had only, as long as you had smoked pot once, you were eligible. You know, because we could find reasons of how you did your parents wrong. I mean, did you ever sneak out of the house once? Did you ever get caught lying? Well, it's druggy behavior.
Yeah.
You know, even if you weren't doing drugs, it's one of their things was druggy. So anything could be considered druggy. You know, I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, lying to your parents. I mean, every kid in Detroit would have been in there.
Yeah, every kid.
What kid doesn't lie to their parents? You know, I mean, I did.
Yeah,
you know, we all do, or we all did.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I don't lie to my parents anymore. Sometimes to their detriment, but.
But I think maybe you were saying that it closed down 3 years after you left. Maybe some of the parents saw things that they didn't agree with, maybe, and called the authorities or something. Or,
yeah, I think they did. I've only recently sort of I think I learned about your podcast through one of the Reddit. I think it's Reddit Troubled Teens or something.
Okay.
Someone had come on there and said that they had just been on this, and I kind of looked it up. But I've only recently kind of followed some of these troubled teens. Like, it's crazy that they're still happening, and I know some of these like ranches and wilderness.
Oh yeah,
they work you to death. I mean.
Oh yes, some of them are even worse than that. Some of them. There was one called the Bethesda Home. It was in, I believe it was in, not Missouri, but I think it was in Mississippi, I believe.
Okay.
And it was a teen home for pregnant teens.
Oh.
And that, when the teens had the babies, they would sell the babies, So yeah. And this took place in the 70s. So you still have a lot of ladies out there in their 50s and 60s who are still looking for their kids. I mean, most of the people that ran the place, I would say about 99% of them are all dead. So there was no accountability. Yeah. So
good point. I mean,
a lot of bad things happened back for those troubled teen homes, man. Especially, like I said, a lot of them don't have any regulation. That's the problem,
Yeah, I don't know if it's again. I really looked into the history of straight and Synanon, which is what straight kind of comes from. And there's this guy Arthur, I forget his name, but he started Synanon. But a lot of it kind of ties into, there's this senator / ambassador named Mel Sembler that really pushed a lot of funding for all this. It was kind of part of the Nancy Reagan war on drugs.
Okay.
That's where I say, like, a lot of this you can kind of trace it back to government stuff. And I don't know if you've read the O'Neill book on Manson, and it's called Chaos, and kind of just how, like, even things like Charlie Manson were sort of like projects to understand how to control people and groups. And
probably CIA. If
yeah. I don't know how far the show goes into that stuff, but I mean that's where I've taken a lot of it.
They got their mittens into everything.
Yeah, so. It's culture creation, mind control. I mean, what better way to practice things by getting parents to drop their kids off?
Brainwashing, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it happens. It happens in a lot of these schools. Some kids that go in there defiant, come out totally for the place that they were at. I mean, they decide to work for them, and it's just a brainwashing cult.
All it is. Suicide in 6 months, which we saw a lot of. I mean, not to make light of it, but that's. Before I turned probably 20, I'd probably been to 4 pathway funerals. It wasn't overdoses; it was all suicides.
All suicides. Yeah.
Yeah. You would think, because they tell you, "Oh, you'll die if you're not here." You think it'd be overdoses, but it really wasn't. It was trauma from that, and I mean, maybe what they were doing before, but when you get your brain whipped around like that, It doesn't really help you heal. It just helps you adapt and learn how to keep them off your back.
Right, and it makes you even more angry at the system. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So
I mean, it's what you know, it's kind of crazy.
yeah, it is. I mean, a lot of people, like you said, a lot of them turn out to be homeless drug addicts. Some, like you said, commit suicide. Some just are not the same. They're on meds,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it just, and for some people, I'm not saying everybody's like that, but some people get through it fine and either just forget about it and
Yeah.
go on with their life, or they just put it behind them and say, okay, that part of my life is over. Let's just keep going forward. Everybody's different.
Yeah. I would
Everybody.
say from my experience with the pathway thing, um, like I said, there was a handful of suicides and things like that. So clearly they did not handle it well. Um, one of my good friends out of there, he's doing fine. He's had some health issues, but every time I talk to him and I bring up pathway, he's like, "Oh, I haven't thought about that in years." I'm kind of like, "How did you not think about that?" But whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, I always, I still have like dreams about being dropped off, convincing my parents, like, "Hey, I don't need to be. This is not. It's crazy. Get me out of here." It's like, so I don't know. I think for me, seeing like, I don't know if you saw the Netflix documentary that came out recently, the program, but that was like,
No.
oh, if you're talking to people about this stuff, the program on Netflix, just
Yeah.
Pathways,
I've
they show like
I've
a family tree of the programs and Pathways on there, and it's
I've been meaning to watch it, but I just don't have time.
yeah,
You know
no,
what I mean?
yeah,
It's but sooner or later I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna watch it. There's a lot of things that I have to do that I haven't had time to do yet. So because I'm juggling 3 or 4 things.
yeah.
So,
Well,
but
you're doing this. I mean,
I do this. I got a
much of
full-time
what you're
job.
doing here is probably better than almost a Netflix documentary because you're getting the
Yeah.
whole. It's not just one person mad at one program
Right.
capturing the whole thing.
And the thing was, like we had talked about before, we got plenty of time here. I was not in a troubled teen home.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm originally from Corpus Christi, Texas. Okay.
Right.
And Corpus Christi, Texas was the home of the Roloff Evangelistic Enterprises. It was headed by a man named Lester Roloff, who is basically the founder of the troubled teen industry. He started his there were Southern Baptists, okay,
Yeah,
and
where I started
they
in Baptist. I
they
gotta write this down. Sorry.
they started in the late, I would say, middle to late 60s is when it actually started. He built 2 homes, the Jubilee home and the Rebecca home. And he had about 200 acres of land outside the city limits.
Mhm.
And he also had a school there, an elementary school. And this was, for me, it was 1981.
Okay.
Okay. I was still in elementary school. So my dad was a true Lesterite, as I like to call him. And he sent me to that school. So you had the Rebecca Teen Home in front, and then you had the elementary school, which was called the Rebecca Christian School, but it wasn't a home, in the back. So that's where I went. So, and I didn't have too much contact with the Rebecca girls or any of
Mhm.
the other, because he had 5 homes where he was at. He had the Anchor Home for boys, the Lighthouse Home for boys. He had the City of Refuge for older men, for adult men.
Oh,
He had Rebecca Home for teen girls, and then he had the Jubilee Home for adult women. And then he had in Arizona, he had a place for Native Americans called the Regeneration Reservation. So he had all these homes where, he would lie to his audience and say, "Oh, they're drug addicts, they're runaways, they're prostitutes.
yeah,
We bring them here so they can, get saved and
yeah.
take Jesus and not do those things anymore."
Okay. Free
And
labor.
some right, and some girls that have been on this podcast have said, I wasn't there for drugs. I was just there because I talked back to my mom.
Yeah.
But Lester Roloff would say she was a prostitute or she was a drug addict. And the thing was, a lot of these girls, like I said, that were not drug addicts, that never touched any drugs in their life, after a year or so of being there, Lester Roloff would bring them up on the podium and say, look, she's been here for 2 years, no drugs. See, the Lord saved her. It was just a gimmick to get money. That's all it was. I mean, he ran a multi-million dollar not corporation, but a business basically.
Yeah.
So, and it was unregulated. So the state never intervened until he decided to make it a nonprofit, a 501c3, which I think he did by mistake, if I'm not, and that's when the state came in and said, you need to take a license for these homes. And he wouldn't do it.
Yeah, because he would never get one.
And after that, it was just full-on war between the Roloff Enterprises and the state of Texas. And it lasted years, decades. So.
Wow. That's not connected to like the Oddfellows, Rebecca Lodges, is it?
No.
Okay.
There's a place in Missouri called Agape Boarding School, which is closed down now. But they were Lester Roloff cohorts. They were basically, they emulated his teaching,
That's what a lot of them do. They spin off, they change the names. I mean,
oh yeah. See,
the
thing, if you have a state that's unregulated,
yeah,
and let's say all of a sudden there's people shouting, hey, they're abusing at that place, at that school or whatever, and if enough complaints come in, the state shuts them down.
Yeah.
Then they pack up.
Yep.
And they move to another state that's unregulated.
Yep.
And I would say 9 times out of 10, this is why I asked you about where this building was, because a lot of these, let's say 9 out of 10 of them, would be out in the middle of nowhere, miles away from the city limits, in the middle of the wilderness, basically. So if you ran, you tried to escape, you wouldn't know where you were. You could easily get captured. Yeah.
So it's all very it's all the same playbook. That's the wild thing to me, is that it's different versions of it and different locations and different names and sometimes different leaders, but they all kind of have the same playbook, and it all comes down to making money and trialing mind control tactics. That's how I see it, and they taking advantage of parents and using collateral. Children are like the highest currency, right? So
right. I mean, how many kids were trafficked? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I think about that.
I'm sure it happened.
Yeah, because even Pathway had, I forget, I want to say it was Columbus or Indy. There was definitely an Indiana one, and we'd always hear about, we'd see some of them, but yeah, sometimes kids would just get moved back and forth between Indy and Southfield, and you wouldn't really know why, or in hindsight, it's probably the ones that you only had one parent involved or no parents involved, and because there were kids that like neither the parents were around, but like the grandparents didn't really know what to do with them, so they'd send them.
Sure.
And just pay for it, and most of them had to be sort of hands-on, like the parents had to be involved to a point, but there were a few where we just didn't really ask questions; they were just there, and it's like, I don't know what happened to them or if that was happening, but it'd be pretty easy pickings, and when you look at the people that run these places, like I'm going to look up this dude, Lester Roloff.
Yeah.
I guarantee I'll find connections to like a certain. Well, the fact that he's Southern Baptist, and that's my mom's family is Southern Baptist, and Reagan, and again that whole war on drugs thing, and that whole. I don't know. I try not to be political, but a lot of the Republican Party back in the 80s and 90s, a lot of that.
Oh yeah.
Together, and although a lot of these groups start as leftist parties, leftist groups, because it's you have the religious side of it, and then so Synanon, which is like the start of Straight and Pathway and all that, kind of started more as a leftist commune, where they had like a house where you would live there, and it's all about being drug free and
Right.
uh, living with the group and finding freedom through service and things like that. But
So,
very quickly it turned into I'm gonna bang the chicks and the guys are gonna work for me.
right.
Just like
Sounds kind of like a hippy dippy kind of culture, you know?
classic. Yeah, well, yeah, but then just because you had a Republican politician push it doesn't mean they can't shift and
Sure.
adapt. I mean,
Sure. And like you said, being like I said, being, the thing about being unregulated, or the good thing about being unregulated to them,
yeah,
is the fact that there's no state coming in and saying, "Okay, we're going
yeah,
to go ahead and go through your place and see if everything is." They didn't have that, so they could
yeah.
abuse kids sexually, mentally, physically behind closed doors, and nobody would know.
Well, it kind of makes sense that the one you were part of was in Texas, which is pretty conservative and Baptist demographic,
Yeah,
and like Synanon started, I think, in L.A., which is more commune and liberal based. So it's like you got the allowing demographic in place. You just face it a little differently depending on what neighborhood you're in. So
yeah.
um, yeah,
I
because I
don't.
know Utah is a big part of that too, and
Oh yeah.
Utah with the Mormons and all that. That's notorious for cults, and so here's a fun thing.
Okay.
Little side note: do you know of the Process Church? They have a longer name, but they were really big in the '60s. They're connected to like the Son of Sam murders and
Hmm.
Charlie Manson and all that. Um,
Okay.
so the Process Church of the Holy Judgment or something. They're really famous because they all wore trench coats and had German shepherds and stuff. And so anyway, they were one of these like '60s cults that were a little more aggressive than just the hippies, and they did their whole thing. But they end up sort of getting persecuted, and they moved to Utah, and they disband and they changed their name to Best Friends Animal Sanctuary, and Best Friends Animal Sanctuary has been in Utah for many years now. There's a TV show on like Animal Planet or Discovery about them, and they're a giant, huge place in Utah where they used to film movies, and they just take care of animals because they're nice, friendly people. And when I was in Pathway, every few years I was part of this. We would go as a group to Kanab, Utah, and spend a week free laboring at Best Friends Animal Sanctuary. And haven't quite put it all together, but I feel like you have this one call out of San Francisco and this other call. You know what I mean? Like they're all
Right.
combined and working. They're sending their kids over for free labor. And again, nothing happened to me, but I couldn't. You can easily see how that whole transfer could include some children being moved around and.
Well, if you think you can get away with it, they're going to try.
Well, they're networked. I mean, that's two connections of two totally different cults that have a free labor agreement going on. you know, they
Yeah.
they plane kids from Detroit to Nevada or Utah to come work for a week. And what happens in that week to some of the kids that don't have chaperoning or
Like I said, that sounds a lot like the prisons where they would, send prisoners out, or even the
yeah,
jails. Send the jails out to pick up trash along the side of the road,
for sure
stuff like that. Free labor, basically.
free
You know.
labor.
Yep. The counterculture back in the '60s wasn't just the hippies. You know what I mean? It was other weirdos too.
Oh
you know.
yeah, I that's kind of like one of my kind of hobby interests is uh,
Yeah.
the hippie scene, Laurel Canyon scene, and sort of how all that blends in with
I think that's
culturation.
I think that's when the Satanic Church came out too in San Francisco
Yeah,
with
San
Anton
Francisco,
LaVey.
Anton LaVey and his connection
Yeah.
to Hollywood, and
I've been dying to get somebody from there to come on the podcast and talk about that
that'd be
church.
great.
I know. I think
Yeah,
maybe one of these days. So
someone will come out. I mean, there's people. I don't know if you know, like Mark Passio. He is allegedly a an ex-church priest in that church. He does his own thing. He's got his own channel and everything, and he's got his own sort of unique style. But there are people, but a lot of them, there's a grifting culture, especially right now too, with podcasting.
Yes.
And so I'm not saying that about Passio. I don't know him, but you kind of have to be careful with that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's like they say, once CIA, always CIA. It's like once a Satanist. I don't know, man. I don't know how far I'm gonna go. But.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, maybe we could talk about more subjects in another podcast. But
yeah, I'd love to.
The thing with Synanon and the CIA. Oh yeah, that's something to get into, man.
Yeah, that's kind of my it's an area of interest for me. I actually meant to come a little bit more prepared this week, but
that's okay.
Maybe we'll do another one where I'll have some things I can back up.
A lot of people will prepare like bullet points,
Yeah.
That way they can stay on, because some don't stay on track. They kind of go off on a tangent, So you got to kind of reel them back in and say, okay, let's focus on the matter at hand. But it doesn't happen very often, It's just people that have never been on a podcast before that happens to them,
I have a little bit. It's been a few years, but I can talk pretty easily.
Yeah. Well, I got the Hammer podcast is also on Reddit as well.
Okay, I'll have to find it. I actually purposely didn't listen or watch anything. I figured I'd come in here totally blind.
That's fine. But yeah, just go on Reddit and just search for the Hammer podcast, and you'll find it. So
cool. I will, and I don't know if I'll necessarily promote the one that I'm in, but I'll start trying to push it a little bit.
Well, I don't go on Reddit too often. I try to stay away from it sometimes.
Oh God, I never really knew Reddit till a year or two ago, and it's a mess. But
yeah, it can be a little toxic.
Yeah, there's certain things like for what I do for work, like I doubt there's a lot of like bots on there trying to sway conversation on my job, so I can go in there and learn things about my industry. But yeah, I mean, you get too much into certain subreddits, it gets a little wild.
Yeah.
So
yes, it can.
That's fun. I didn't know about it. I grew up, in the 90s, early internet user, and if it's not Windows 98, I'm confused these days. So
well, I enjoyed Windows 7. After that, it was all over.
Yeah. So, now I'm on a Mac, but only because it's easy.
All right, Sam. Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Like I said, we'll be in touch. Maybe we could talk about some other subjects.
Sounds good.
In the future. So, but to everybody out there, these podcasts are on 5:00 Central Time, Monday and Tuesday. I can make exceptions like I had for Carissa because she's in Honolulu and her work schedule's weird, but other than that, it's Monday and Tuesday, 5:00. So, all right. So, Sam, like I said, we'll be in touch. Cool. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Having me.
All right, man. You take it easy.
All right. Take care.
Yep. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. This was actually a brand new thing for me because I've never heard of this Pathway Family Center before. It is kind of weird because, the structure was a little different than your regular troubled teen homes. So, but it was a good time. And like I said, thanks to Sam for coming on and telling his story today. So for the Hammer Podcast, I'm Jason. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video. And like I said, we have Tara coming up on Monday. She went to Happiness Hill, Home for Girls. So for the Hammer Podcast, I'm Jason. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and we'll see you on Monday for Tara's video. All right? Have a great time, everybody.